Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Bordertown Strange. I'm Pam.
I'm Jess.
Enzo.
We're waiting. There we go.
And he's Enzo. And we are missing Mark tonight. It's really hot where we're at, and he had to work in an air-conditioned building today. So he is taking the evening off to recuperate. But tonight, we're going to bring you along for the ride as we explore time anomalies, missing time, gain time, time slips, and all the fun that goes along with that. So, yay!
All right. So, first of all, some housekeeping.
Yep.
Right. Before I go into normal housekeeping, I just want to say, because it hasn't been announced on our channel yet, but Enzo and Scotty Rodemaker, who I don't think has been in our channel yet, but soon will be, I'm sure, are brand new members to Bordertown Paranormal. So yay!
Woohoo.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited to have Enzo and Scotty. So Enzo, of course, as everybody knows, is our military history guy and our astronomy nerd, which we've been sorely lacking in our group. And Scotty is a member of Red Dirt Cryptids, and he runs Kansas Sightings. So he's, all things on the weird creature side. So it's some nice additions. We've been needing to do this for a while. We haven't had an addition to our group in like 5 years.
Yep.
And things have gotten crazy and hectic, but like in a good way. So because we have all of these projects going on and podcasts and the Paracon, it was just time to kind of usher in some new people, or AKA slave labor.
Yes,
they just don't know it yet.
So we need victims.
Pam needed someone to carry her bags.
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
I had that. Yeah. There you go.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So welcome Enzo and Scotty to the group.
Woohoo! Snaps.
Yeah, super excited to have you. So moving on to the doldrum of it. I want to thank all of our followers on Facebook and on YouTube. You guys have been awesome. A number of weeks ago, we had to put a call out to up our numbers because Facebook kind of changed some of their policies about showing live feeds. And we just needed just a few extra viewers, and boy, howdy, you guys really outdid yourselves, and we're still climbing, which we were so happy about, because the more followers and the likes and shares that we get, the more content we can bring everybody. So keep up the good work. If you are on Facebook right now watching live, go ahead if you can and just like and share really quick with all of your friends. And if you're on YouTube right now, make sure you hit the thumbs up, hit the bell and subscribe so you can know when we're coming up with some live feeds and stuff. You'll be the first to know. And if you are listening, you can, of course, find us wherever your podcasts come from. Just find your favorite podcast provider and we should be there. And if we're not, let us know. Okay. Also, make sure to stick around towards the end of the show. I know everybody kind of likes to bleep off a little early there, but stick around for the notebook game. If you'll stay in the chats, you can join in on the fun. And of course, we welcome comments and stories as we're going along. We'll interact with you, so please do that. All right, so before we go into time anomalies, let's do our What the Weird Word of the Week. And this week, actually, I think it's going to be words. You want to do that, Pam, or?
Sure, you want me to do one and you do the other?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start with time storms. This is a really interesting one, and it was, actually, I have the book here somewhere too. Jenny Randall's wrote a great book. titled Time Storms. And what it is a disturbance in time, which can bring people and things from different times into the same timeline. We're going to have a few stories about this tonight, so this will be a fun one that goes along with the topic.
Yes. And then the Oz factor. So this is almost crossing into time storm territory, where we're talking about some things that actually do pop up when you're getting ready to have an experience. So let me make my screen bigger so I can read this.
Sorry, got a little small, didn't it? I should give you the big one. You didn't have your glasses on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So the Oz factor, it's a term coined by ufologist and author Jenny Randles. And we just showed that book, correct?
Yep.
Get this book if you're interested in this topic we were talking about tonight. It is ever so interesting. It refers to the experience of being isolated or transported by the real world of everyday life into another environment, which is quite similar to the real world, but changed enough to be noticeable and disturbing. And you're going to hear a lot of these stories tonight. The Oz factor is just that weirdness that happens right before some of these stories happen. You're going to hear it a lot in UFO stories, UFO sightings. You're driving along and suddenly your car cuts out or your radio starts acting funny, and then there's an odd smell. You smell ozone or a smoke smell, or
Some
everything
have said like alcohol and ether, kind of a mix.
Yeah. Or everything goes dead silent. Like you can't even hear the bugs or the birds anymore, and it's just eerily quiet. Yeah. That is the Oz factor, and you're going to hear a lot about that tonight. So we thought it appropriate that we do the 2 words tonight. So as we bring these terms up, because they will come up tonight, you will know what we're talking about. So that's your What the Weird Words of the week.
Woohoo.
Kansas people talking about Oz. Who knew?
Right?
Who knew?
It fit so well. Truly, truly did. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to kind of switch back and forth between some personal experiences that we've had as a team and separately. And then we're going to go into more of the research that we did to go along with this as well. One of the first stories is from my childhood, and we'll start with that. But what I'd like to do real quick is switch this over. I know Jess isn't a Doctor Who fan. I know Enzo is. I know I am for sure. And this was a great quote from the 10th Doctor, which is David Tennant. And it says, people assume that time is a strict progression from cause to effect. But actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. It's kind of the way he said it. So thought it was a perfect explanation, kind of a definition of it too. Oh, perfect. You've got the TARDIS. Nice.
There we go.
More of a Tom Baker guy, but I appreciate all of it. And to be honest, trying to describe it, it's just as good as any physicist could do. To be honest, it's difficult to try and encapsulate what time even means.
It is, because I mean, it's perspective, if nothing else. You know, we're locked into what we perceive and what others perceive for time to be. So what is it really? Nobody truly, honestly, they try to define it, but it's hard to do.
Can I say something really quick before you start your story?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just want to give all the listeners just a little bit of a lead in to what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we are going to start off with some personal stories. And the reason why we're doing that is because a number of years ago, we found ourselves immersed in this stuff pretty much against our will. Everybody knows me by notebooks, my little moniker right there, right? And that's because I keep everything listed down, even when we're investigating. When we investigate, I write down everything. I will write down when you go to the bathroom. I will write when somebody walks out of the room. I write down everything. And because of this, we started finding missing time and added time and just weird time anomalies mixed up with our investigations. And Pam's going to start off with a story tonight that really started her off on her way with this stuff. But it's an important story because it's going to lead into Pam and I's first very big experience with time anomalies. So we're going to mix it in with other research tonight so you can hear all the craziness and find out that you probably have experienced too. You just don't realize it yet. So I'm going to let Pam take off with her story.
You know, it's a little disturbing too when you realize if you don't keep track of things like is done in our group, what are we missing? You know, what's slipping by that we're just kind of being, oh, that's a little odd, and moving on with our day. It's a little creepy when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
But
if they are not thoroughly creeped out by the end of the show, then we have not done our job.
No kidding. So, okay, so this first story is, we call it the disappearing house. And this came about when my brother, he's 4 years older than me, and he was able to drive, and it was during the summer when we were home. So I was about 10. So I was born in 69. So this would have been 79, 80, you know, right in that time frame. It was during the summer. And he collected beer cans, and he collected specifically the screw top ones. So they're like impossible to find now, but back then you could still find them. And so what he would look for, he would look in ditches, and he would look for old burn piles, you know, and old trash piles and stuff like that. And we were out west of town, and we were in my parents, they had a little bitty Pinto. So we're really lucky we didn't explode going down the road somewhere too. But we're out, and we're driving down just a dirt road out the country, and we see this old abandoned looking house and a barn off on the west side of the road. And there's a little road, you know, a little lane that turns in front of it, a little road. So we go down there, and there's not any no trespassing signs or anything like that. So he pulls in, and there is a trash pile between the house and the barn. So we were like, okay, cool. You know, we'll see what we can find. And he did find 2 cans in that, and he pulled them out, and we put them in the car. Well, you know, we're kids. So the next thing we're going to do is kind of investigate a little bit and kind of see what's going on. And we walked around, the barn door was open. And when we walked in the north side of it, it was the bigger doors. And then on the south end was a smaller door. And everything was wide open. So we go in, and you can see like old rotted tack still hanging on the wall and things like that. And my brother was a little bit in front of me, and he gets to that back door, and he kind of steps through it, and then he immediately retreats, and he's like, yeah, I don't think we need to be here. And so, you know, I'm like, I want to see what the deal is. So I stick my head out, and it was the oddest thing. And it's burned into my mind, because outside of the door, in like a half circle, so it would start at like the wall on one side and go in a half circle to the other wall, was like these little animal skulls that were sitting on the ground spaced apart, and they were different colors, like painted different colors. And I was like, yeah, we don't need to be here. I don't know what that means, but we don't need to be here. So, you know, we're kind of backing up and trying to figure it out. And about that time, we hear a couple of footsteps in the hayloft, and we're like, oh shit, we're out of here, you know. So he's like, run, run, run. So, you know, we're running and jumping in the car, and he peels out pretty much as a pinto can peel out. And he goes back to the road, and instead of turning back east, he turns west. And so, you know, we're going down the road, and it dead ends. And we're like, crap, you know, we have no choice but to go back by this place again. So he puts it in reverse, and we turn around, and we're going back by, and we're both looking, you know, we don't see anybody, but we notice something really, really strange. And that's the fact that the barbed wire fence doesn't break in front of where we had just turned in. And it's not like, you know, some people used to, and may still, I don't know, use barbed wire as a gate, you know, but you can tell because it's kind of droopy.
Sags.
And yeah, it sags. It's not like taut like the rest of it. This was taut completely. So we didn't see anybody. So he stops, and he backs up a little bit, and he's like, you know, we're looking and you can see our tire tracks. So we obviously had pulled, it's the right place, you know, there's no doubt that it's the right place, but we're like not understanding. So, oh, we lost Enzo. Hopefully he can come back. So we're like, okay, we're just going to go on and we're going to go home. So we do. And we get home and we tell our parents, and they're like, y'all are nuts, you know, whatever. So we kind of just let it go. You know, what else are you supposed to do but let it go? And after that, so I was about 10 at the time, 10, 11. So it was a few more years before I got old enough to where we would, you know, ride around out there in the sandhills. There's not anything to do in Caney, especially when I was a kid. So we spent a lot of time just driving around and, you know, doing stuff like that. And every time I was out that way, I would look for that house and I could never find it. But all my friends knew the story because, you know, it was something I had to talk about because it was so weird. And I want to say it was about 2011. I was working at the Historical Society in Caney. And one of my friends, her name's Leslie, she worked there with me. And we did a thing with Find a Grave where when people would request pictures be taken in cemeteries, we would go out and fulfill those. And we had some requests for a cemetery out in the Sandhills. So she and I jumped in the car, and I had a 35 millimeter digital camera with me, you know, and she was driving. And we go out to this little cemetery that we both knew really well. And we took the pictures that were requested, and we get back on the road, and when we're coming back out and we're heading towards the main paved road, I'm like looking off to the west, and I'm like, oh my God, there's the house. And so she immediately hits the brakes, and she's like, she knew what I was talking about, you know, because she'd been with me 100 times looking for this place. And she's like, you're kidding me. It's right here. And I was like, that's it. It's right there. Have you ever seen it before? She'd never seen it before either. Now, one thing that we have to remember is it was, you know, it was like fall, springish, some winterish, somewhere in there. So there weren't a lot of trees in the area that we're going to cover this place up. But so we're setting from the road, and I zoom in and I take a series of pictures of it. You can see the house, you can see the barn. And we get back to town, and I get everything uploaded, and I upload the pictures to Find a Grave and get all that done. And I'm so excited about, you know, we finally found this, and it kind of just gets put to the side for a while. And then in 2012, when our group started, I remember telling everybody about it. And Jess happened to be at my house one day, and we were talking about it. And I was like, you know, I've got the pictures, you know, let me pull them up and show them to you. So I pull them up on the computer, and I'm going through, and I find all the Find a Grave pictures, but the pictures of the house are not there. And I could not believe it, because if they were all going to, you know, if they were going to be gone, the entire series of photos, including all of the cemetery photos, should be gone as well, but they weren't. They were there. And so I have no idea what happened to it. It really kind of made me mad because, you know, I had this great story, and I had the physical proof of it at some point, and it's like it decided to not be there anymore. Mm-hmm. And so Jess's mom grew up out in that area. And so she got a hold of her mom and asked her about it. And you want to tell this part a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So my mother actually grew up not even a mile away from where this house was. And I asked her about it. I was like, do you remember this house sitting here? And she was like, oh yeah, that was old man so-and-so's house. And I was like, oh, and she was like, yeah, he kind of kept himself. He was okay though. She goes, but his house burnt down like, I think it was back in the 60s.
Yeah.
And she goes, it burnt down when I was fairly young. And I was like, oh, did they rebuild? And she was like, no, it was just a foundation from then on out. I don't know where he went to.
And we
so
were like,
we know for sure that house was not there when Pam saw it.
No, there's no way, because if it was gone in the 60s, and I didn't see it until 79, 80 for sure, because I know it was the year my brother started driving, and I know for sure we were in the Pinot. And, I know for sure I'm 4 years younger than him. So I would have been about 10 years old. So there's no way. I wasn't even born until 69. So there's no way I could have seen it before then. And we did actually go back and look at some aerial views through Google, and we have found where the foundation was of the house and the barn. So you can see that, but I don't know what to say about the rest of it other than it's the craziest thing.
Yes. We do know, so we actually use that spot now as kind of a home base area. It's almost always active for us, and we have done many sessions out there with different meters and rods, and we almost always get something to chat back with us in some fashion. It's usually something different every time, which is the real oddity to it. The house has not popped back up yet, however, for
That's
us
not.
anyway. We're
We
waiting
do look for it, though. Yeah,
we
we
do.
do look for it.
I
It's
bet I
exciting
can go
to know
by
where
there
it
every other
was.
day.
We, all of us, it's such a small place. All of us end up out that way at least a few times a year. And every one of us I know takes a look that way every time we go past just to see. I can't imagine what would happen if it finally popped back up again. We'd probably be on the phone with Pam just screaming, like, get here now.
Yeah. But I'm not really
It's one of
sure I
those
want to
things
be
is-
there if it comes back,
Right. Well, what do you do if it does reappear? Because if you're there and it disappears again,
Yeah.
are you sucked off to wherever it went and you're
I
trapped
don't
in
know, because
wherever it is?
the freaky part, Enzo, I'm not sure how much of the story that you actually know. Because like Jess said, we kind of use it as a home base, and we go out there and we do work with dowsing rods, and we do work with EVPs and the ovulus, and all the equipment is going on. And there was one specific time, it was all four of us were out there. Me, Jess, Mark, and Mike. And we had, I know the ovulus was going, and I know we were using the rods, and we had a voice recorder and everything. And Jess was taking notes, marking everything down. And something was responding for sure. And yeah, he saw something. It's on the other side of the river, though. Yeah. Lost my train of thought. Oh, so we were doing the work and asking questions, and I don't know how it got brought up. I'd have to look back at the notes, but something about me, and it was calling me the traveler, and we didn't know what that meant. And it kind of was like, that's why we were like, does Pam really want to be there? If this house comes back. But at the same time, they've gone out there without me and didn't get
anything
at that same spot. When they go out without me, they don't get anything. But, it's not like I'm manipulating the rods or anything, because Jess has the rods in her hands, or, somebody else has them in their hands, or the ovulus is going off. And I know at one time, Mike had played his ringtone is like tribal drums. And he had played that because it did whatever we were talking to at the time did say that it was native, or it was of the land.
Well, we tested it. So what had happened is that we were having a rod session that day, and his ringtone is a American Indian tribal beat. And his phone went off because his wife called. And I was sitting beside him with the rods, and they weren't doing a whole lot. And when his phone kicked on with that tribal song, my rods slammed to point at his phone. They slammed up against my chest so hard, and they wouldn't move off of it until he turned his phone off. So, but like I said before, like, it's never been the same thing twice. So we ran with like the American anything. We thought, maybe it was American Indian, something there was involved with that. But then the next time we came out and we tried to roll with that again, it didn't work. We had to go a completely different route. So it's always a surprise.
And it wasn't
what we're
long.
going to
I
deal
mean,
with.
it was during that same session, and it was shortly after that happened with the rods and the phone. Mike got ill. He had to get out of the vehicle because he got really nauseous.
Ooh,
And he
boy, I
never,
didn't
that
know
never
that.
happens to him. So it was, yeah, it was a really strange incident. So, that really became a hot spot for us to go back to, because it was somewhere we were almost guaranteed some type of response in that area. But that kind of played into more of what happened to us later. Out,
Yeah. They absolutely need to know that story to understand what we're
yeah,
going to talk about next. I will say before we hit that next story, let's touch on a couple of stories about reappearing, disappearing houses and places. There's a lot of very famous ones, but we have some ones that are close to us. There's one that we love to tell about, one of our favorites. It's down in the Pahuska, Oklahoma area. It's
yes,
very well documented. And I found a newspaper story about it that was done on it like 2 years ago. A reporter found the original guys that this had happened to and kind of reinvestigated it for them. So I'm just going to give a little quick version of it, but it's super interesting. It was a couple of gentlemen whose jobs it was to go out and pull the old oil and propane tanks off of disused farms and old properties. And they got orders one day to go out to this area just north of Pahuska, Oklahoma, and to pull an old tank off of this farm property. And they got out there in the evening and they said it was very unused. It wasn't even pasture land anymore. It was just overgrown prairie. And they pulled up and they followed some tire tracks that took them back to this old tank they needed to pull. And they realized that it was still full, so they couldn't pull it yet, and they had to send orders back to have it emptied first. But while they were there, they decided to go and investigate the old farmhouse that was there, this old 2-story farmhouse with a huge wraparound porch. They said it was just beautiful, even in its old age. And they said, another half an hour just exploring this old farmhouse. Got done, climbed back in their trucks and left for the day. And over the course of the weekend, they said they had gone in there and cleaned the tank out and it was ready to go. So the gentleman went back in the next day and drove in there and kind of lost their way. They weren't quite sure where they were supposed to be going. The tire tracks they had once followed now weren't so great. And they were trying to make their way back. They couldn't figure out where the tank was. They couldn't see the house. The tank was near the house, and they kept looking for this house and they couldn't find it. And they were kind of traveling in circles around this open prairie area when they finally ran into the little clearing that had the tank in it. And they pulled the tank and they're mystified because the house that should have been right there, that they had just spent 30 minutes going through just a couple of days previous, is suddenly missing, and they're completely freaked out by it. They get the tank loaded and they decide to go back over, and they're hunting and hunting, and they run onto the foundation for the house, but it's no longer there, and they can tell it has not been there for a very long time. The foundation is overgrown, everything's overgrown. All that's left are the steps and the foundation, and they are completely perplexed. And they actually turned it in to their boss, and they found out that their boss had been one of the gentlemen who had went out and pumped it out that weekend.
yeah.
And he was like, there was no house there. In fact, we had the hardest time finding that tank out in the middle of all that prairie grass. So there's
That
one
is
for you
so
right
wild.
there. Yeah. And the funny thing is it's documented because in their paperwork, they had to show where on the property the tank was. And they drew in a little, section where the house was nearby as like a marker, it's this far away from the farmhouse, which wasn't even there. So
Which
kind
is
of cool.
crazy.
Yeah.
There
Wow.
was one on TikTok. There's a lady called Anti Matrix, and she talks. She takes glitches in the Matrix stories and retells them for viewers. And she had this one not too long ago, and that's the one that I sent to you. We didn't get a chance to talk about it yet.
Yeah.
There was a lady that had written into her, and she had I want to say it was in New York, but it was in, it was like 30 years ago. And she and her friend were looking for a house to move into, and they lived in townhouses, which is really common in New York. And so they're long and tall and 2-story and skinny normally. And they found one, and the rent was relatively cheap, but it was on the opposite side of town where they normally live. But she was familiar with it. She just didn't know anybody in that area. And so she called the number, and a guy said it was him and his brother that were fixing the house up that would be renting it. And she was like, okay. So they set a time to come look at it. So her and her friend go. And when they get there, they see the house, and it's across the street from like a laundromat, which is really convenient. And there's the laundromat parking lot. And then there's an extra area right by the house where they can park, which is, if you know New York, like Albany area, or, Waterville, any of those places, anywhere you can park off the street is prime. And where they would park would be off the street. So they were like already excited about this place. Well, they go in and look, and, it's an older home. And when she walks in, she was like, the guy was nice enough, but he really gave them the creeps. And at some point, they needed to not be there. So when she realizes this, and they're out of the place, and they are all of a sudden in their car away from the house, and they're not sure how they're in the car and away from the house because they don't remember leaving the house. And so, when they went somewhere with their friends that night, they were like, oh, we've got a story for you. This just happened today. And their friends are like, whatever, y'all are ate up, kind of thing. And so it was just, again, it's one of those stories that you tell, and they're not on that side of town a lot. But one night they were supposed to meet at someone's house for a party, and they happened to go down that street, and they looked for that house. There's no house there. There's like not a foundation. There's the laundromat. There's the drive or the parking lot for the laundromat, and there's the access parking lot. There's no house, and it doesn't look like there's ever been a house there. And so they're like, okay, what happened? Well, then she really gets the creeps, and she's like, I immediately knew what happened. And this was years ago. I immediately knew this was a different lifetime. She didn't say I jumped timelines or anything, because that really wasn't lingo then. I knew I was in a different life. And she said, what I think happened is, I think they pretty much lured us there, or whoever, not just us in particular, but someone there, and that they killed us, and that we didn't make it out of that, and that we just moved. Now that I know it's a different timeline, that's what had happened. And I was like, that's nuts. That's crazy. But that's the story I was wanting to tell when I ran across that. Freaky though. So, and stuff like that. It's like, oh crap, especially when you hear of other disappearing houses. What the heck does that mean? What does it mean? Does it mean anything? Does it just mean that time's not linear like we think it is? Does it mean everything's happening like Einstein? Einstein, he was the one that, he knew time wasn't linear. He knew that, we've got our past, our present, and our future, and it's all existing somewhere right now at the same time. So is that all it is?
I'm actually kind of curious about like the original story about going to empty out the propane tank. They said it was full, so they needed somebody to come and empty it. I'm kind of curious, how much did they get out of it when the guide went out?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Was there anything in it? Was it totally empty? Like, this guy's crazy or whatever, and just had like maybe a little pressure or something like that, where they were out there the previous day when there was a house there. But that's so bizarre, but I totally believe it, because it happens. I mean, I won't say often, but it's happened enough to where you kind of have to at least question, and crap, does this happen all the time everywhere? And we just don't know it because there's some abandoned property somewhere where this house appears and everything like that. And then suddenly it's gone for a period of time. It's like, why is it suddenly just there for X number of hours? What's causing this?
Yeah.
It's freaky.
It's a good point. One of our theories about the Pam's house that popped up for her, it sets right in the heart of the area of the Sandhills area that we keep talking about. That is just quartz and river and ley line.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it was just right in the ripe area. And I think Pam has a few abilities, and she was also very young, so she was a little bit more open to things that she didn't quite understand yet. And I think she was just ripe for the picking is what was happening. I think that house popping up for her was probably a personal thing.
Mhm.
I don't know if that house would have popped up for anybody else but her. I think it was just the right time. And I think it's
she's
that
labeled
way.
as the traveler now. This is for
Right?
you.
Yeah.
How freaky is that? I mean, what does
Well,
that
see,
mean?
well, I mean, I've always assumed that whatever was talking to us, because we were sitting when that happened, when we got that name for her, we were sitting right in front of that house, or where the house should be. We were right in front of it. And I always assumed that it was whatever was taking care of that property, or was a part of that property, or was a part of the situation, was letting her know that it knew that she was the one that could pop in and out there, that was her business there, not ours. Because it never said anything about the rest of us. It was just Pam. And like she said, every time we go out there to do any kind of research without her, we get nothing at that property, at least. The rest of the rest of the area we do, but that property goes kind of dead for us. So
It's really odd.
I think it's hers in some way.
This
Actually, to circle back for that just a second, for Pam, you said that the thing that spooked you guys, you and your brother, to get the hell out of there was seeing those weird painted animals skulls. Do you think there was like some kind of a cult type activity there?
Now, see, that's another thing that was really in that area, or at least purported to be in that area, was some ritualistic activity. And there was another sighting that kind of goes along with all of this, actually, doesn't it?
So there's two other.
Yeah, you're right.
There's one that happened quite recently.
That's right. I wasn't thinking of that one.
It's so, yeah, we have other time slip stuff that happens out there besides
even further
the
back
story
than what mine was.
Yeah, which we will hit, like within good time here, because I don't want to like overload everybody quite yet. I do want to say before we head on with our story, while we're on the disappearing reappearing, for all of y'all who's interested in the books that we research on, so I'm gonna highly recommend Rosemary Ellen Guiley's Slips in Time and Space. So what it is it's her research on it, but it's also a compilation of stories out of Fate magazine, their stories and stuff like that. She's kind of like handpicked some ones that she kind of researched out herself that she thinks kind of held some validity. And within it are a couple of our favorite stories that we've actually chatted about before. We've talked about the Hesperides Islands that pop in and out of being and have since we were able to map.
Right.
Like it's on this map, but it's not on the next map. And it's on this map and it's on the next map.
16s and 1700s. It's like sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't. I mean, to be fair, there is some pretty foul weather there, so you may not actually see that there would be an island. But as similar travel is going on there, you wouldn't miss a whole island, or even like, because there's several smaller islands right there with it, right? There's like 3 or 4. So to miss those all the way around. I mean, I can understand saying, okay, we know there's something there, so we're just going to put a blob. That was kind of common back in the day. But that is a weird one.
It is very strange.
It's very well documented in old seafaring diaries and journals that these sea captains and stuff would make. They would often make little notes like, the Hesperides were here today. We made a stop. Make sure to be off the island by such and such time. Or drove by, or went by today. The Hesperides are not in at this time. We'll stop on our way back. that's how they always talk about it. Sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. And the place
How
actually
do they
had its
know
own
what time to
currency.
leave by? That's my question. It's like,
That's never been written about, but they've said it so often in these journals and stuff that you wonder if everyone just kind of knew, if it's there, don't stay for too
past
long, or maybe you
sunset or
leave
something
with
like that, I
them.
guess. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes.
And that's
Yeah,
the thing is where does this go during that time when it's not there that we can sense it is,
yeah.
and do you have that passage of time or suddenly, there's somebody from 50 years later that happens and they're like, wait, what happened?
It's like a real life Brigadoon,
Yeah.
which is the little village that is under a curse, and it appears and disappears like every 10 years or 15 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Can't recall exactly, but yeah, it's like a real
Yeah.
life
I
There's
will
something to
say
that.
it's so well documented. A couple of years ago, we were doing research for the annals of, we were doing the annals of Kentucky on the guys's What If Tomorrow podcast on the Fringe.
Mhm.
And we all got copies of the Annals of Kentucky and was rereading through it, trying to make some notes, some talking points and stuff. And we got on to do the show, and I was like, guys, did you catch what was on page such and such? And they were both oblivious. They were like, well, what are you talking about? What
Yeah,
are you
we were
talking
like,
about?
no, I've slept since
And
then. No clue.
I pulled the
So
book out
sorry,
and read.
notebooks. I don't have the
Yeah.
pages memorized.
Well, I pulled the book out and I read the passage, and it's an entire passage in the Annals of Kentucky about the Hesperides.
We were shocked. Mark and I were both like, how did
Wow.
we miss that? It just, went right over our heads when we were reading it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was there.
Yep. But anywho, there's other islands that do this. There's St. Brennan's Island. It's supposedly part of the Canary Island chain. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And it actually moves, I've been told. That sometimes it's not exactly in the same space that it last popped up in.
That's wild.
And that one's just as documented too. So lots of disappearing repair. And we could go on for days on that one. There's the famous hotel in England up on the hill that pops in and out. And the same thing there, like people have taken pictures on the inside because it's just so quaint looking. And then later on when they get their film developed, or well, now they don't even have to, they turn their phones on and all those pictures are gone.
Yep.
Pretty much like what happened to Pam. So
Which is really strange because
crazy stuff.
And these stories are in this particular book actually. And when you read that and you're like, this same thing happened to me. And I was telling this story way before this book was even, printed, let alone knew anything about it. So yeah, because I think this one's from like what, 2018, 2019, somewhere in there.
So
Yeah, I've been
pictures
telling
of
this story since
disappear.
the 80s.
Yeah, pictures disappearing of like that. I mean, that's like Back to the Future rules kind of a thing where it's like, oh, this didn't happen, so that just disappears off of the photograph. But this
So,
is like the
yeah.
photograph doesn't even exist.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
freaky because I
It's
even
super
went
weird.
back to look at Find a Grave, and the pictures were on there. So that's how I was able to figure out the exact date of when all this occurred. It's because of the pictures that were on Find a Grave. But it's like, what the heck?
Yeah.
But I do remember at the time we were at my house and I was like, I swear I'm not nuts, trying to tell Jess, I swear I'm not nuts. She's like, yeah, I believe you. And I'm like, let me call Leslie. So I called Leslie, and Leslie's telling her on speaker, absolutely, I saw the house too. She took pictures of it, so at least I had someone with me, that could verify for me that it did occur. But that was the freakiest thing to find out.
Yeah.
Because when her mom was like, yeah, it hasn't been there since the 60s, we were both like, oh no, what does that mean?
Yeah. Now, the reason why I didn't think it was that incredibly strange, I mean, I was in awe of the story, how could you not be in awe of a disappearing, reappearing house that literally is within a mile or two of you? That's insane. But it didn't freak me out too bad because I had actually grown up with some of these oddity stories happening out that way. So like I mentioned before, my mother lived not even a mile away from this spot. out in the Sandhills area. And of course, that area has always been steeped in weirdness and strangeness. And my mother was witness to a lot of it because back in the day in the late 50s, early 60s, when she was very young, you rode your bikes, you walked around with your friends. So she was knee deep in it all the time. And I'm just going to tell her story really quick. She had a time slip, is how I'm kind of thinking it is. A time slip when she was young. So she was literally on the road back to her house. She was with a friend who I won't name because she still lives in the area. They had been out riding their bikes and they were coming back towards her house, and they took a turn. And at the end of this turn, they realized that the road ahead of them was completely filled with cars on either side of the road, which was saying something because the roads out there aren't that wide. So there wasn't really much of a lane to get in between. And they got off their bikes and were walking their bikes and trying to go up between the cars when my mom realized the cars were all older models, like they weren't up to date. They were she guesstimated about 20 years old or so. So what, 40s, 50s style vehicles?
Yeah, 30s, 40s.
Yeah. And she thought it was really strange, what are all these kind of classic-y looking cars doing out here? And they're walking really slow. And she realizes that all of these people are down in what was a farmer's field at the time. It usually had crops in it, but at this point it did not. She said she couldn't remember what time of year it was. She said it would have had to been spring or summer, so it should have had crops in it, but she couldn't quite remember if it had at that time. And her friend crept up between two cars to kind of peek out and kind of nose around and see what was happening. And she said there had to have been about 80 or so people standing out in a circle wearing black robes around a huge bonfire. And they were chanting something they couldn't understand. They were far enough away. All they could hear was just like the low rumble of this chant happening. And she said she just got completely unnerved, knew she shouldn't be there, and was trying to get her friend to back out from behind her so they could get out from between the cars because she was just getting very scared. And she said just before she pulled out from between the cars, she watched them lift somebody up in the air and could have sworn that that person went into the fire. But she was so scared at the time, she can't say for certain that's what she saw. But it scared her so bad, they stumbled back, grabbed their bikes, and started like fast walking to try to get in between the cars and get all the way down the road. She said her friend actually urinated in her pants. That's how scared she was. They got back to her parents' house, told their parents, and luckily her parents believed there was something going on. Her dad grabbed the shotgun and headed off down the road on foot. And by the time he got there, there was nothing. There wasn't even marks in the grass on the side of the road where all those cars were parked. And there was no spot in the field. There was no one there at all. And they completely believed her because they saw how scared they were when they came in. And of course, her friend had wet her pants. They could see that. Because, what kind of a lie could have,
Of all things to say.
Yeah. And they asked them both separately what they had seen. And of course, it was the exact same story. So they just chalked it up to, well, that was weird. Let's not go play down that way for a while and stay away from that area. So yeah, I grew up hearing that story from my mother. She was quite willing to talk about it. I think that was just kind of how she got through it. She would openly talk about it. I think she thought the more people that knew, the less crazy she was, maybe.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a little more likely to believe Pam when she told me the story about this house popping in and out. Now, oddly enough, or not oddly, I guess, because it's the way we go, a couple of years ago, we had a report given to us from a lady in the area whose sons witnessed almost the exact same sight, only in the pasture right across the road from that pasture. And she
Yeah.
didn't know the story. Yeah.
She did not.
Yeah.
And there's no
Exact
way
same
they would
story.
have known if she didn't.
Yeah. Insanity. So let's move on to the big story. So do you want me to tell it, or you want to tell it?
We can go back and forth if you want.
Okay.
So this was probably 2013, if I remember correct. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm.
We had decided that we were really getting into ley lines at the time, and thought with all the weirdness out in the sandhills that it would be a really good time to start mapping ley lines. So we had left out, we'd actually started out in town, and we'd stopped by the Historical Society and picked up a map so we could mark on it. And when we left the Historical Society, we noted the time and just wrote it down in her notebook. And we headed out into the sandhills, and you go out and you go over out by the, what all is out there, the old city dumps out there, and the, the dog pound and all that stuff. And then you go over the river, and you're going on down the pavement, and there's a place that used to be called 4 Corners, sorry. And at that point, you can turn north, and you can go on back to the river down that way. So we're headed that way, and we see, as we're getting across the bridge and close to the turnoff, we see a jogger, and he's jogging heading towards town. And so Jess makes a note of it in her notebook, and I'm driving, and so she writes it down. And he wasn't going fast or anything, he's just jogging. And we turn off onto the dirt road, and we head down it, and we stop by one spot, and we sit for a little bit and do some rod work, and really didn't have much luck, did we?
That's yeah.
And so since there wasn't much happening, we decided we'd go on back to the river. And so we do. And when you're going back to the river, you go across this little area that we call Monster Bridge. From my era, it's called Monster Bridge. And you come off of it onto what was the old highway, basically. And you turn back east, and it'll take you to a roundabout at where the river is. So we went out there, and as we're going, we see this little truck, and it's sitting off the side of the road. Not unusual, a lot of hunters out in the area. And there's this man sitting there, and he's got binoculars up, and he's just staring, out. So he's facing west, we're coming east. And so when we see him, we're looking at him do this off to the north. Yes, exactly what he's doing. And so, he doesn't flinch, he doesn't make any moves. So we're like, okay, we're just going to drive on by him. We're obviously trying not to disturb him. So we go on, and we sit at that area. We try the rods again, and we, run some EVP sessions. We do everything. Nothing. Everything's dead. We are not getting anything. And then out of the blue, I'm like, we got to go back to town. I got to go to the bathroom. I've got to pee. And, we haven't been out that long. So it was really weird for that to happen when it did. So we're like, okay, well, we're going to go back, and we'll go get some lunch and look over our notes and everything. So we get out, and we head back out, and we're driving, to the west now. And there sits that little truck, same exact spot. And we notice the guy is still sitting there with his binoculars out to the north, not moving. And we're like, okay, that's weird. That's weird, right? Yeah, that's weird. So we're like, whatever. So we drive on down the road, and we go back out, and we get back up to the pavement. And when we get on the pavement, there's the jogger, and he's still going the same direction. So we're like, okay, that's a little strange too. Maybe he's doing a loop or something, maybe he made his way back, and now he's going back and just going back on the circuit or whatever. So, we weren't like startled or anything to see him at that point. So we go into town, and we go to a little restaurant there. And it's when Jess pulls out her notes, and we start looking over the timestamps on stuff. We start realizing, what the heck? Do you want to take it from here, Jess?
Yeah, sorry. I was
Nope,
trying to
you're
get my
good.
stuff gathered up.
Let me get you on the words. Sorry.
Yeah, so we head back into town, drop off stuff, and then we head up to there was a little cafe here in Caney for a while. We were going to grab some lunch, go over our notes. And I'm sitting down with my notes because that's the first thing I always do when we get done with anything is sit there and make any notes that I might have forgotten about, and I go back and reread, did I make sure to mark this correctly while it's still fresh in my brain? What needs to be gone through? And I went through it like 3 times before I showed it to Pam, and I was like, there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The times don't add up right.
No.
So I'm just going to go back through the entire situation really fast with time marks so people can understand what happened. So we left Pam's house right around 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
The Historical Society is only like 2 minutes away. We spent maybe 5 minutes there, getting out of the car, going in, finding the map, getting the map, coming back out, getting back in the car. We head out to the Sandhills. It only takes about 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how fast you're going, to get out through the Sandhills. So you go out of Caney, over a set of railroad tracks, past the pound and the dump. You get over the dike to the river. You go over the river, past Four Corners, up to the turn. That's where we saw the jogger at.
Yep.
We make the turn. It's another minute to get to our first spot. Now, at that spot, we sat for nearly 45 minutes, running rods, running meters, taking notes before we gave up on that spot and thought, let's head to the river. Now, the river isn't that far away either. It's only another 3 to 4 minute drive to get to the river turnaround and to that area where we saw the truck sitting with the guy sitting ever so still and not denoting us whatsoever. And we go to the turnaround there at the little river area. We sat there for another 30, 35 minutes before we ultimately decided nothing's happening here. It's very quiet. Let's turn around and go home. Pam, of course, needed to get to the bathroom. I was starving because we had been there for, we'd been out there for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
And I was like, nothing's happening. And I couldn't get a lot for the ley line. We weren't getting a lot of ley line action, so my meters weren't acting up at the spaces where I thought they should as we passed through what should have been ley lines. And we're like, let's go. So we leave, back past the truck who's staying perfectly still, all the way back around our original spot, back out to the turnoff. The jogger's still there, head back into town. Now, by all estimates, we should have been coming back into town sometime right before noon, which would absolutely make sense. Pam really needed to use the bathroom. I was starving. That's the time we should have been rolling in. Now, the interesting thing is when we got into the cafe, what Pam and I failed to notice was that the ladies who were running the cafe were looking at us very oddly. And we just didn't really take notice of the fact that there was no one else in the cafe. And it's because it wasn't even 11 o'clock yet. They were still setting up for lunch.
Yeah.
Because it was literally like 10:42, I believe, was the marker on it when we got into the cafe to eat our lunch.
Like that, yeah.
So by all estimates, we lost, I believe it was like 52, or we gained 52 minutes of time.
Yeah.
So what should have taken about 2 hours took less than an hour for us to do. So if you go back and think about it, you think about the fact that that jogger wasn't all that far away from where he started at.
Yeah.
And the gentleman who was sitting in his truck with his binoculars and looking at the deer trail lines, he never made notice of us. So we've always assumed after we came to and had time to consider the situation, because let me tell you, Pam and I were flabbergasted when we realized what had happened. We soon realized that maybe that gentleman in the truck, by that time, we might have been moving so fast against normal time that maybe he didn't see us. Maybe we didn't exist for him.
Well, even under classical time travel type rules, you should have passed yourselves going back to town at some point and stuff like that. You should have seen yourselves going the other direction
Never
from
thought of
42
that.
minutes ago.
That's interesting.
That for that kind of a thing to occur, because you're now back in time 40-ish minutes by your recollection. So
Well, I
you
assume
could have
so.
accounted
Like
yourself.
I believe that the first part of the trip out to the first spot and that there was probably correct. That we were still on the correct time. I believe it was sometime when we passed over towards the river that everything went super speed. Because if you delete that time that it should have taken for us to go from that first spot to the river and then back into town again, if you erase that, then it makes the time okay. So I think at some point right after or during the middle of that first spot of setting is where the time sped up for us.
It's almost like a reset.
Yeah. It's weird.
There is something interesting about, because there's always been lore, of course, about running water, like a river or a creek or something like that, and how witches can't cross it and spirits can't cross it and things like that. Running water. Is there? Did that have anything to do with it? I mean, I would find it odd if it didn't, because there's. I feel that there's always some kind of old school lore that still rings true. There's a reason that it's part of that, old school type lore, that there's something to it. It may not be exact, of course, or anything like that, but there is something strange
a grain
about
of truth in there, though.
Yeah, there's something to where that's what they believed, back in the day, 100, 200 years ago, whatever you want to say, but to carry it forward to today, that seems to be, like you said, that's when it seemed to be accelerated for yourselves. So there's certainly something strange going on there. God, that whole area down there is so bizarre. I need to move down there immediately.
Right? Yes, you do. Although I'd be afraid we get like a disappearing, reappearing Enzo, though.
Well, and that's the danger part about all of this stuff is, if you're talking about, wibbly, wobbly, timey, wimey stuff, you can get pretty messed up in that. If you get mixed up in it, there's not stories of someone from the future coming back to today. It's always, well, everything was, like it was, 50, 100, 200 years ago. It isn't, some, future man suddenly showed up in a wacky looking costume, wacky looking shirt and talking to a glass sphere, trying to talk to spirits or whatever it is. It's always the other way. It's whatever. It's always going from present to past. It's never a future to now kind of scenario, which I kind of get, because the way time travel, kind of even the butterfly effect and all that stuff. That the future is not certain from this point in time. You may be able to travel back into the past, but if you start making changes, that future is no longer certain.
Yep.
That kind of thing. So it's certainly one of those things that, does time protect itself where you can't make any changes or make any kind of strange changes to the timeline where it's going to affect the future? I don't know. But we certainly have these cases of flashing back, and this particular part of it, though, where you have found time. We talk about missing time with abductees and stuff like that, where they can't account for long periods of time. And this is you've got a surplus, obviously, of time. You have extra time now that you're arriving before the lunch crowd is ready to be served, and things like that. It's very bizarre and can get very convoluted very fast.
Do a little search here for notes.
I've had about 1,000 theories on it since it first happened to us, because you can't help but think about it. I will say this, like, Pam and I were so flabbergasted, like I said, when we first looked at the, like the time logs and stuff, and we were still processing it while we were trying to eat. It was one of the quietest lunches we've ever had together, and that's saying something. We usually just talk each other's ears off about whatever's going on, but yeah, that was a quiet lunch while we looked over this paperwork. And it took another couple of weeks for us to get back together again and really discuss it. And that's really when we started thinking about, oh, the guy in the truck, the jogger guy.
Yes.
But I've come up with like 1,000,001 theories. And I believe that time started to speed up for us after, or right as we were leaving that first spot. And I think it leads back to the whole, because we were at the spot where Pam's house was.
Mhm.
That's that spot. That was that first
There
spot
you
that we
go.
were at. And I always wondered if maybe while we were there, something clamped onto Pam. And as we were leaving, we were still within its realm or whatever it causes for her. And perhaps it shot us back out in some fashion. And that's why time was kind of on our side. Like maybe we were in a realm, like another dimension or another realm or something. And so we weren't actually moving within our own time. That's why another oddity is that while we set out at the river, the meters were dead. They didn't even show a little bit, and it always shows a little bit out that
Yeah.
way,
It
with
was
the
very
river
good.
right there. And it was just extraordinarily quiet. Too quiet for that heavily wooded area with the river running right there. There's all sorts of wildlife down in that area. Besides your regular birds and bugs and stuff, there's always deer tromping through, and you can hear the river bubbling, and it was just so quiet. So I wonder if we were just not quite in our timeline. I don't know. It was
So check this out. So some of the research that I was doing, and I threw this in here and actually have it underlined. And this is completely off because this is more along the lines of UFO encounters and things like that. But it really fits with this. So this says if someone or something came close enough to a ship that was creating its own space time, normal time and space as they know it would cease to exist for them. And they would come under the influence of the artificial space time. So basically, in this case, the UFO is literally creating an alteration in the local state of space time. And this would generate a major distortion effect that would be experienced by the witness.
goo.
I mean, we're not by
Why are you
any
gonna scare
means
me?
saying there's a UFO involved or, anything like that. But doesn't this kind of that time
Yeah.
distortion? It's kind of, I mean, a time distortion is a
It
great
very
word for it.
Yeah. It fits. Scary, but it fits.
I know.
Trying
I
to
was
think
just like,
about like Travis Walton's story of his abduction kind of a thing, where he walks out, he sees the weird craft, he gets too close and gets zapped. His buddies abandon him running off down the hill, but Travis's story is he wakes up on some kind of table and board the ship and immediately slugs the first being he sees, which is like a great kind of thing, which I kind of appreciate that from Travis. And having seen him speak, I can see it. I can see Travis being just a no nonsense. You zapped me, plow. But he was certainly missing for a period of days.
yeah.
Of that, which isn't necessarily what he experienced. Not like he was sitting around on this craft thing punching aliens for days at a time. It was they healed him apparently, or cured whatever malady he suffered when he got too close to the ship, and punched one of them, and had to get talked down by other entities, and then they like, all right, get off our ship, you weirdo. And suddenly it's many days later in a totally different town nearby, but not exactly where he was, and blah blah blah. So that whole that whole timey wimey aspect of it is there's something to that, where you can, time on board the ship is not necessarily the same amount of time outside of the ship, kind of an idea. So the same thing could be considered if, as Pam was alluding to, if there's a craft somewhere nearby and you're somehow caught up in that envelope of space-time it's creating for itself to go do whatever it does, you might get swept along with it.
So what if it's not a craft? What if it's just an interdimensional pocket
area, like a hot
area,
spot?
or there is little people activity in that area too.
Right.
So what if it's
if
they
it,
just happened to
if
be
it
in the
was
area at the time?
If it was to a specific area, I would think that would be something that would be easily repeatable. If you would go back the exact, if you retraced your steps, does the same thing happen again? Which I'm sure you've probably done, and probably
We have,
seen that it doesn't.
and it hasn't.
So there's something else added into that equation besides just being in the exact same place at the exact same time. So,
I mean,
there's something else was going on at the same time.
Yeah,
there has to be. We don't know what it would be. I mean, we know what date it was. We know the times of day. We know all of that, and can't repeat it. We can repeat it. It just hasn't occurred again.
Yeah. Well, it has occurred again, but not in the same manner and not at the same place. So once this started, boy howdy, we got taken on some roller coaster rides. So I'm going to go ahead and just start into the next one. And I'm going to tell a little bit about the beginning of it. And then I'll let you take over, Pam, where kind of you and Mark start,
We have visuals of this one too.
Oh my goodness. This story, this one still gets me. And I wasn't even like directly involved with it. I was kind of on the outskirts. Well, but I got to view it from an outsider's perspective. So I'm going to start out actually a couple of weeks beforehand. So occasionally I get precognitive dreams. It's one of my weirdness. Usually they don't mean anything. I don't get anything, any kind of fantastic information that's going to help me save somebody. Or I don't get, like I see
lottery numbers.
No lottery numbers. I don't see natural disasters coming. They're just like little glimpses of something that I personally am going to run into later. It doesn't help usually in any fashion. They're just weird little flashes. Anywho, a couple weeks out from this happening, and it was before I even knew this investigation was going to happen. We had not planned it yet. I had started having reoccurring dreams of being in this weird blue colored room and feeling very dizzy and feeling like I was going to vomit and starting to bend over because I thought I was getting ready to vomit. And when I looked down, I saw this old shoe sitting on this concrete floor. And I kind of stare at it for a minute, and then I realize that shoe is getting closer to me faster and faster, and I realize I'm falling. I'm getting ready to hit the floor, and then I would wake up. And I would just have this dream over and over again. And then 2 weeks later, we were asked to come in, and I can't say where it is because it's an anonymous one, but it was a retirement home, a nursing home. In a town in our county, I'll say that. Anywho, the gentleman who owned it, it was an old dilapidated one, and he had plans to flip it and turn them into apartments. But he couldn't keep a work crew in. Da-da-da-da. Isn't that always the story?
It is.
So, yes. Exactly. Yeah. It's the beginning of every like horror flick, right? Can't keep the crew in to work. So the four of us go up there, me and Pam, Mark, and our other teammate, Mike. We go up there and we are prepared with batteries and stuff because we know that they have completely turned, they've actually snipped the lines
for
the electricity.
It's snipped.
Yes. No electricity. And just to give you a general idea, so it's one of those nursing homes that was built in the late 50s, early 60s, and it's got the spoke design. So there was a middle hub where the nurses station would have been at, and the little cafeteria and a little sitting room, and probably some, I think there was a room there that was supposed to be for exercise and entertainment. They had like a TV in there. And out from that were three long spokes. One was the main entrance spoke that you could go through, and the other two, or the other three, there was four spokes. The other three were rooms for the residents, right?
Yep.
And some showers off of one. One had some showers and stuff in it. And we get there, and our protocols when we investigate is that we take baseline readings first. So we know if there's any bleed anywhere. We knew there shouldn't be much because there was no electricity hooked up, but still. And ground, like feet on the ground is good. We don't know what kind of condition the building's in. So somebody gets sent in to check it out. Is there a ceiling falling someplace? Is there a bad floor somewhere? Is there someplace we can't even get into because something's collapsed? You never know. We get there. So Mike and I decide to stay behind and load batteries because we're going to need them. We load new, fresh batteries and everything, and we send Mark and Pam into the building to take baseline readings. And Pam at that time was in her wheelchair. She was having some problems with her leg at the time. So we sent her and Mark in her wheelchair, which, yeah, it's perfect. We love it when she's in her wheelchair because she gets to hold all the equipment.
Mark can put his equipment in my hoodie too. And hold it.
So Mark and I stay behind in the truck loading batteries. We send them in. And this is where I'm going to turn the story over to Pam.
All right. And this is where I am going to pull up some pictures here and share. Okay. So sorry, this one's flipped, but it's a little strange looking. So when you first go into the building, this tells you of how long it's been, because if you look at this, it's got the menu. And it says Tuesday, February 24th, 2009. That's the last day that the building was in occupancy, was actually up and running. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see the timestamp on my photo is Saturday, November 5th, 2016, 6:01 p.m. Okay. So that's when we were actually at this facility. And so keep this in mind. This is when Mark and I entered 6:01 p.m. to go in and do the baseline readings. We go to the next slide. These are a little bit easier to see. So if you look, the first one is, the area, it was like the dining area, 6:05 p.m., right? And then the next one, the slide things over it. Can you guys tell what the time is on that one?
6:08 p.m.
6:08. Thank you. So the one thing I really want you to notice about the one that says 6:08 p.m. in the middle here is the amount of sunlight that's coming through the end of that hallway. Okay. Because when we came in, we go through the area where the cafeteria or the dining hall is first. And then we come to the nurse's desk and we head off to the west. And that's where you're seeing the light come through this hall. This is the first one that we went down. And what Mark and I did was we would stop at every room and we would take pictures and baseline readings and we would move on. And, it wasn't taking us any time to do this. We would stop, I would check the meter. He would snap a picture. We would move down the hall to the next room, write down what the meter says. He would snap a picture and we'd move on. And in fact, in this last picture, that's timestamped 6:10 p.m., you see me taking a picture of Mark, taking a picture of the room kind of thing. So this is what we're doing. And you can even tell behind Mark in this one that there's a good amount of light coming through that window there. And so we had gone down to the end where you see the light in the middle at the end of that hallway. And we were almost back up to the nurse's desk. So there was probably, 6 to 8 rooms on each side of each hall. So we would have hit stopped and take 16 pictures. So this picture that I took at 6:10 p.m., this was pretty close to the nurse's station, maybe halfway down the hall to the nurse's station on the way back. So it was probably another 5 minutes before we got to the nurse's station. And when we're coming up there, we hear Jess, where are you guys at? You know, she's like, Mark, Pam, where are you guys? And she sounds a little, you know, a little perturbed. And we were like, well, we're right here. What's up? And she is like, what are you doing? You know, we've been trying to call you guys on the phone. You're not, you know, the phones aren't picking up. You know, we've yelled, nobody's answering. And we're like, we haven't heard anything at all. And she's like, well, you know, we're out here. You've been in here forever. It's getting dark outside. And we're like, no, it's not. You know, it's still light out. And we turn around to point, you know, make our point down the hallway. It's pitch black out there. You know, it's pitch dark. We're like, okay, it was just not pitch dark. It was bright light out there. What is going on? So you want to go on from there?
Yes. So from Mike and I's end, they went in like usual. We loaded batteries. We made sure all the equipment was ready to go inside. And then we just sat on the tail bed of his truck waiting for them to finish up. And it started getting a little late, and I was like, oh, they're taking a little bit too much time. I'm going to call Pam and see if they're nearly finished, or if it's okay if we just go ahead and come on in. And the phone rang and rang and rang, but no one answered. And I was like, well, maybe she doesn't have her phone turned up all the way. So we tried Mark, and Mark's didn't even ring. His went straight to voicemail. And we were like, okay. So Mike was like, well, just give him 5 or 10 more minutes. And we gave him 5 or 10 more minutes, and it was starting to get a little dark. And we were like, try to call him again. So when we tried to call them again, he tried to call Mark. I tried to call Pam. It didn't even ring through this time. It was a very odd, usually you get like this number's unavailable, or this person's unavailable. Let me send you to this like open messaging. We didn't get any of that. It didn't even ring through. And we were very concerned then. We were like, we have bars. It's working. In fact, I believe he'd gotten a call from his wife not too long before that. So he had been openly using his phone. And it started getting darker and darker. And Mike was finally like, screw this. We're going in. I think something might have happened to them. So we go in the door at the end of the first big hub, and we're walking down the hallway. And like Pam said, I started calling for them to see if I could hear where their voices were coming from, because this time it's getting very dark inside the building. It's hard to see our way, and we don't know the building because we didn't get to go in when it was light. And we finally saw them come out into the nurses' hub going, what? And that's when I yelled at him. I was like, what the hell are you doing? We've been out here forever. Are you guys okay? And that's when that entire exchange went down with the whole, it's completely light outside. And they turn and look, and they're like, and I'm like, yeah, it's dark. We've been sitting outside for like a freaking hour.
Yeah, we were
waiting for y'all.
We couldn't grasp the fact that it was just bright light outside, and all of a sudden it's not. So this next picture that I have was right after we met up at the nurse's station. So, you know, it was within probably 10 minutes. So at the very latest, 6:20 p.m., right? Look at the timestamp. 7:18 p.m. And the whole reason I took this picture was because now keep in mind, again, the electricity is completely cut off from this building. It's not just turned off, it's cut off from the building. There's
physically
no way.
Severed. There's no way.
Yeah.
Absolutely severed. And the whole reason we're looking up at this is because the air conditioning kicked on while we were sitting here. And so Jess and I were trying to figure out where it's coming from. You can see the look on her face. She is like, what's happening?
Yeah.
How is this working?
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing that was working.
But the interesting thing to note is that these vents for the air conditioning system were all the way down the hallway, one about every 10 feet or so. And we walked to the other vents down the hallway, and none of them were blowing. It was just this one. Mm-hmm. And it shut off. We heard it click over and shut off right after this. So it was only on, and it never kicked back on again, just that one vent. Anywho, so at this point when we're doing this, we're actually still taking baseline readings because they had only gotten part of that first wing done. So we all spread out. Mark and Pam kind of went one way and me and Mike went down the next hallway they hadn't hit yet. And he was checking, it had some showers up at the front part of it. And then after that were some rooms. He went into the showers and I opted to start in the rooms. And the first room I walked into, I felt very odd when I walked into it at first. And I couldn't quite figure out why. I figured maybe because it's just an old building and I've never been in it before. And you get the creepy crawlies sometimes when you walk into those types of spaces.
It was kind of creepy when it was dark too.
Yeah. And I walked into this room and I've got my flashlight out and I'm looking everywhere. And I look down at the floor as I'm getting ready to turn to leave the room. And guess what's on that floor? It's that damn shoe that I kept seeing in my dreams. And that's when I realized that the room is blue and the floor is concrete. And I started getting really bad palpitations. And I started feeling nauseous and I was feeling that dream replay again. And I stumbled back because all I could think of was like, I'm going to crash into this floor. I'm getting ready to re-experience this again, only in real life. And I stumbled back out of the room and I felt pretty good once I stepped past that threshold. And I actually had to go and drag Mike out of the bathrooms to come and see.
Yep.
He was like, back off, Holman. I'll come and look at your room later. Blah, blah. And I was like, no, you're going to get your ass in here now.
I ain't looking at your shoe.
Well, I had not told him that yet. I just couldn't get it out, what I was experiencing. I just needed somebody with me because I didn't want to like walk into this room again and like pass out. Lord knows what was going to happen in the next part of that dream. And he walked in with me and he knew automatically what was happening because I had been telling them about this weird dream that I'd been having. And he was like, holy F, is this your dream? And I was like, it absolutely is. And he was like, it's just how you explained it. And it took me over the course of that evening to figure out that I don't think it was me that I was experiencing in that dream. I think I was experiencing someone else's experience. And I just kind of relived it a little bit in my head when I walked in there. I actually went in later on and like kicked that shoe into the corner just to kind of like, I don't know. It was kind of like breaking the spell for me to remove it.
You're breaking the, honestly, what you could have experienced in part of the dream or whatever as part of a recall or whatever you want to call it. You still could have gone through all of that because you were going through the whole, you were probably hyperventilating at the time. You were like freaking out and going, oh my God, it's that shoe.
She was freaked.
Yeah.
And I would have been too, rightly so.
Right. To the point where you could have probably hyperventilated and passed out and fallen face first into the shoe.
Probably.
But
yeah,
you had the foreknowledge of already going through all of that, maybe hundreds of times, and you knew what it was and you snapped out of it. You broke that time loop of occurrences and all that, and just kicking it to the other side of the room is just further spreading yourself from that original timeline where you're seeing it freaking out because you recognize it because you freaked out in your dream or whatever. That's that time loop kind of a thing where if you snap out of it, you that one thing that you change, even if it's, and it doesn't have to even to be a physical thing. It's just, wait a minute, I've done this before.
Yes.
That realization that you can, that's kind of like breaks that spell, as you say, that timey-wimey spell.
Yes.
Where it's, you snap out of that loop that you were probably stuck in, where you dream about it and then it happens, and then you dream about it and it happens, and finally you're like, enough. and you snap out of it to
For
where
that matter.
Even bringing someone else into it that wasn't in the original dream, where you're bringing Mike in and it's like, hey, wait a minute, is that a shoe? It's like, and he pulls you out or whatever it is, that whole butterfly effect after that is the littlest change, that it's a change from that original timeline. So that kind of, as you say, breaks that spell. Where you're now outside of what you have normally experienced. So everything's a new timeline after that. Everything's
Yeah.
brand new. Doesn't make you feel better, but
Right.
Yeah.
it's not that continual loop of freaking out, seeing the shoe, and then falling into it face first,
Yeah.
and over
Lord knows
and
I didn't
over
want to
and
do
over
that.
again.
You know, and it
Right.
makes me wonder too if you were like catching on to somebody, you know, that you were experiencing it for someone else. Once you broke that, I wonder if you broke it for them as well, and they were able to get out of that
I
situation.
hope so. Yeah. So there's so much more to this place, and I'm gonna talk about it because this place is one of the oddest experiences we've ever had, and we've never been able to truly explain all of it. So I've had my situation, and Mark heads down the next hallway that none of us have been in yet. He goes off on his own, which is actually perfectly fine because Mark is our rock. He rarely feels anything at all. He's very analytical about everything. That's one of the reasons why we send him off to do baseline readings. He's just great at it.
He's a really
And
good ground.
he's my pitch hitter. If I get overly, because I pick up on a little bit of stuff, and sometimes I get a little overwhelmed. And he is a good guy to go back to. He's just so baseline that I can breathe around him sometimes. But he heads off down this hallway on his own, and he enters the first room. And he's only in there for a minute or so before he's back out again. And we just happen to all be there in the hub as he comes back out. And he was pale and green and looking extraordinarily unwell. And we asked him, I was like, Mark, are you okay? And he goes, no, which is saying something for Mark. Mark is the most jovial, happy person to be around. Even when he's having the worst day, he is just the happiest guy to be around. And he was just gaunt and like, I'm not okay. And I thought he was going to vomit. He had that look, that lean to him, like, I need to move away from you all. And I know his heart was pounding because he was breathing kind of heavy. And he finally found a seat and got set down. And I think we brought him some water. And we were like, what is wrong? Because I thought maybe he was getting ready to have a heart attack or something.
Yeah,
something was happening. And he goes, don't ask me to go back in that room. Don't ask me to go back in that room. And I was like, what's in the room? Because all I can think of is like, was there a chemical in there? Or was there a dead animal? You know, was something that made you sick? And he was just like, I don't know what's in that room, but I will never go into it again. It took him a good 10 more minutes to come out from underneath of that and be able to function again. It's the only time I've ever seen that happen to Mark. Like he couldn't even walk into a room. He stayed far away from that doorway when he had to go down the hallway. He would bypass it. So beyond this, we had meters going off like crazy, especially in the nurses hub area. At one point, it felt like there was like 1,000 people standing around us.
That was what I was
staring.
wanting to bring up. We felt like we were circled by people just staring at us, trying to figure out what we were doing there. And then after a while, it felt like they got bored and just kind of wandered off again. But it felt like we were just being observed, you know, and it felt like they were leaned in on us. You know, it was the oddest feeling. Yeah. Very, very freaky.
Now, this place, besides the weird air conditioning thing happening with absolutely no electricity hooked up to the building, it drained batteries like crazy. It absolutely killed my brand new Nokia camera, which I was sad about because it was like a $500 camera. It killed it completely. It was a digital / manual, and it killed both sides of it. So sad. One of the bigger things was, and we now wonder if it was kind of in its own time bubble. Once Mark was back on his feet, he then proceeded to spend like the next hour ripping batteries out of the scent packs on the wall. So, you know, those old spray scent
Yeah, the auto
things that
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 hiss.
spray
Yeah.
like once every 10 minutes or something like that, the little mist of spray. There was one of those in every room, which, you know, yay, you know, probably need that in a nursing home type situation. But if you remember the date marks
That's what I
from
was
those
looking
pictures,
at. Yeah.
this building had been unused for what? Um,
7
it was
years.
like 7 years was the last time anyone had used that building.
February 2009 on
So
the
six and a half
thing
years.
there on the whatever we're having for lunch today calendar, and then 2016 for the when the actual picture
Yeah.
was taken. So
Yep.
Yeah, so we were trying to run EVP sessions. We were trying to run recorders, but you could hear these freaking scent things going off all over the building, like ch, ch, ch. And it was annoying. And Mark finally lost it because he was actually in a room doing some readings and stuff, and he got sprayed by one. And that's when we realized they still had scent in them.
Yeah.
Because he smelled horrible after that. He smelled like an old lady. Yeah, he went insane when it sprayed him, and just he ripped that thing off the wall and yanked the batteries out of it. And then he thought, how the heck are these batteries still running after this many years? And he pulled the scent packet, the pouch out of the thing that came off the wall, and it was nearly full.
Mhm.
after 6
Right?
years,
Yes.
After 6 years. And he started doing this. He started meticulously going into every room except for the one room he would never go back into again, and yanking these off the walls and pulling the batteries out. And you could see the packs in them. They were almost all full.
And Mark used
And
to be a janitor at a high school. And so he was like very familiar with these things. And he's like, they don't last more than 6 months tops at the very top.
Mhm.
so several years later,
Several
it
years
shouldn't
later.
be doing that. Yeah.
Nope.
Nope, they were still running. It's to this day, I mean, there's even more to it than that, like little bits and pieces here and there that happen to us. But it's one of the strangest investigations that we've ever done. We did the gentleman who owned the building actually came in during part of our investigation, and he was so unnerved he wouldn't stay with us because we offered to, you know, like take him through a little bit and kind of show him what we were doing. So, you know, it kind of puts some people at ease when they can see how we investigate. We're not one of those ones that scream and invite the demons in, you know. We're trying to really figure out what's happening. Yeah, he was in there for all of 5 minutes before he was right back out again. And as far as we know, that property still has not been flipped.
Yeah.
You could see where people had come in to start, you know, working on it, like where little sections where like they had maybe started pulling down a little bit of this or that, or they were starting to repair this or that, and then noped right the hell on out of there.
Yep.
And now I know why.
Yeah, for sure. We know why. The oddest place. But you know, that goes back again to that thing that I brought up earlier. I don't think it has anything to do with aliens or anything like that. But again, it's like a time bubble. It's like its own little spot, because when we were inside of it, you guys, we couldn't hear you. You couldn't reach us on the phone. You know, the sun was still shining. It was still, you know, light outside. So where were we? You know?
Yeah.
Or where were we? Where was it? And
Yeah.
so
I don't know.
that makes me think too, the way that we felt like things were people were leaning in and looking at us was were these the original patients? You know, were they there? Were they seeing us in their time as ghosts and trying to figure out what the heck we were? I
I
don't
don't know.
know.
It was
It's so weird. The whole
it's one of the
thing's just
strangest things.
crazy.
Yeah. So that's our second big one. We
That's
will probably
pretty
go
good.
into Yeah, we'll go at we have an even bigger one to talk about, but we're probably not going to do that one tonight because that
It's
one
too
is
big.
exceptionally long. And I would really like to have Mark here for that one because he is a very large part of the
Yes.
next one we're going to talk about. But yeah, so
Rick Lipley made a comment in the chat there on YouTube. You guys were in a snow globe. That actually may not be that far
Oh,
from the truth.
yeah,
that's a really good, yeah, that's a really good alliteration there. Yeah, I like that.
yeah,
You're
we
right, Rick.
absolutely were.
Now, before we move on, because I know we're getting really close, I do want to bring this up while it's still on this show that we were talking about it earlier.
Mhm.
You know how we talked about gaining time? Now, we did a show with the guys where we did a whole bunch of little things that weren't big enough for their own show. And one of those
Mhm.
things was the Indian runners, the native runners.
Yes.
And so that makes me think of, and I put this in here so I could remember to talk about it. So there was a runner, and what Indian runners were, they were, it turned into this whole race where you would take off and they would be able to cover these huge distances in no time at all. Well, there was this one runner, and this was in the southwest part of the United States. Um, he left his friends. He was at like Cottonwood Island in Nevada. Okay. And he said that he was going to run down to the Gila River in southern Arizona, which that's a distance to drive, let alone run. But he said he didn't want anybody else along with him. And they were all like, okay, okay, uncle, whatever, we won't go with you. But the second he was out of sight, the others began to track him. And so, he ran through dunes and things like that. And then beyond the dunes, they realized that they could see his tracks, but they started they looked like he was staggering almost. And they were like he was taking these huge, giant steps. And they just kept getting further and further apart. And they kept getting lighter, like his feet were barely touching the ground until they completely disappeared. And so, he was headed to Fort Yuma. And when they get down there, they learned that not only did he beat them, obviously he beat them, he arrived at sunrise the same day that he had left them back in Nevada. So there's another, where he gained time. He actually went backwards in time and arrived before he left at this place that was, I don't remember how many miles away it was, but it was a long distance. So there's another, example of somehow being able to get into that mind, or that mindset or whatever, slip into that alternate dimension where you could cover that amount of time. And it just, and if you look at Celtic lore and you look at fairy, it's always said that time moves differently in fairy, that what may be 2 days in fairy may be 10 years in our realm. Is it like that? I mean, is that just another name for this other dimension beside us? I don't know.
I don't know. The interesting thing about the Indian runners, so just so people know, Indian runners were a very big thing in the lower central Native American groups. The Indian runners were actually used to send messages.
Yeah.
So whereas we can send messages now by phone or by plane or whatever, they would send these runners, and these runners were trained to do this since their youth. This was what their purpose was. And they would have races for fun to race against other tribes or within the tribe, but they were actually trained. And part of their training was that they would take these potential runners, they would choose potential runners out of the tribe, boys that were usually just coming up into puberty about that age. And they would bring them out in the middle of the night on the darkest night of the month, when the moon wasn't out at all. And they would blindfold them on top of that. So it was pitch black. And then they would make some kind of a signal for the boys to run. And their job was to run flat out, not being able to see where they were going or what they were doing. And the boys who would falter or would be too scared were the ones that were not chosen, and the ones that would just flat out run, not caring what was in front of them, were the ones that were taken. And they ended up being the ones that would actually know when that tree was coming up to them. They had that instinct to know there's something in front of me, I need to move. But they wouldn't slow down. And that's how they trained them. They would pick them first that way, and then they would train them into that. And there's stories about them taking messages intertribally across what now would be state lines, like that far across states, getting messages to other tribes or like cousin tribes and things like that, and then making it back within a day or so. So it's just incredible.
Absolutely unbelievable amount of time that you couldn't even cover in the if you drove, in today's time. They would cover just running.
Yeah, another interesting fact was that these runners were not trained by normal everyday tribal members. They were trained by the shamans.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think there was something else to it.
Book out there, and that's the title of it, is Indian Running. And I can't remember his name. It might be Peter Dobrov or something like that. I'll put it in the show notes. It's a great book if you can find a copy of it.
Yeah.
It's a little
all right. So do we want to do some notebook games before we head out for the night? And there will be a part 2, and there may even be a part 3 to this series.
We barely,
it's a fascinating topic. Yeah, like we could just go on and on with this. So this
we had it split pretty well that we didn't even get anywhere near. I thought we were going to get it.
No, but it is what it is. So okay, yeah. So for those of you in the chats, you know how to play the game. I'll say it one more time. So I have 5 notebooks in front of me. Choose a number from 75 or under, and a notebook 1 through 5, and I will read whatever is on that page. And if you guys want, you or Enzo can pick one to get us rolling. So what do we got? Okay.
For the first one, let's go notebook 4.
Okay.
Page 28.
28. All right.
Oh,
Chris is here. Hi, Chris.
Hello to Chris in the chat.
Okay.
Everybody suddenly speaks up to the chat when it comes to be notebook time.
That's right.
It's the fun time.
Hold on, let me make sure I know what I'm talking about here. But I'm like on my end page. What are we talking about here? Oh, okay. It's the Galileo program.
Oh, nice.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it was an old teaching program. It used a machine that taught at a high rate of speed. It also taught the history and how to use different time travel machines. And this is all based back in the whole Andrew Basiago Project Pegasus stuff that we had done a show on previously with the guys on the French. So Basiago claimed, if I'm trying to remember how it went, all the children who were taught with this particular program became like the most esteemed academics of their generation within the program. And I do know we did a lot of research on this particular machine. And I can't remember what it was called. It had a weird name, but the government did issue these to a lot of schools in the US to be used. It was a high speed way of learning. And supposedly it worked very well. But most of the schools that it was sent to, they weren't trained on how to use them properly, and they didn't understand the technology. So most of them were just put back in old classrooms or in storage closets and never used. Unfortunately, even though these machines were shown to actually really help people learn in a very quick way.
Wouldn't that be a gem to find in some hidden closet in an old school? That would be cool.
Yeah. And the end of this page goes into DARPA and future events being recorded, stuff about 9/11, what actually was supposedly told to George Bush at Booker Elementary the morning of.
I'm going to
Blah,
be
blah, blah, blah,
president of the United States.
So yeah, that's what that's about. So what do we have next?
We have Chris with book 2, page 12.
Book 2, page 12.
Very, very timey-wimey for that
Yes.
selection. So
That was a good one.
Yeah.
I'll
there's
throw
a
a
lot
Doctor
of
Who
there's a
quote
lot
in
of this
anywhere I
stuff in here.
can. So.
Come on. All right. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, okay. So this is on the Garnett House.
Oh, nice.
This is my second page of notes from the Garnett. So the Garnett House Hotel is right near us here. It's a very haunted place. If you all don't know it, go check it out online. You can actually go and stay there the night. Some friends of ours run it as a haunted place to go and stay and investigate. It's an insane little place. Our friends over at Pin Paranormal have really been heavily investigating it lately and have kind of kept their thumb on it, and they've had an entire string of insanity happen. We should probably have them on at some point
to
talk
for sure
about their experiences at the Garnett Hotel. That hotel has been there for so long, and it has hosted some of the most famous people. It has been used as a jail. It's been used as a school. It's been used as a doctor's office. And it's a crazy place. And this is just some basic notes that I had on it. It talks about there at one time was an African-American man that was living up in the attic space. And he was more like the handyman of the area. And they allowed him that space up in there. And at one point, he had actually killed a neighbor lady. Everyone was off to a little revival, and she was home alone. And he went in and just murdered her in the worst way you can imagine. She was pretty chopped up. And he just went back to the Garnett, went right up to his attic space, and went to bed.
Yeah.
With his bloody, nasty clothes still right there. And that's how they found him.
Ugh.
Yeah. So
horrible.
Not good. But that place is just full of all sorts of crazy.
Yeah, that'd be
what do we
for sure.
Yeah. So what do we got next?
Next is Rick with page 70, notebook 2.
Okay. Yay, this one's numbered, so it won't take me that long. Yay. Oh, okay. So this is on the Nephilim giants.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So let me see here. So this is actually excerpts out of the Bible where it discussed kind of some of this stuff. So we've got Genesis 6:4, just before the flood account. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans who bore children to them. These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown. Numbers 13:32-33. As the Israelites prepared to enter the land of Canaan, so they brought to the Israelites an unfavorable report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land that we have gone through as spies is land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people we saw in it are of great size. There we saw the Nephilim, and to ourselves we seemed like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." Yeah. And then I have notes on gateways to Atlantis, Andrew Collins, and then Nephilim in the Greek myth. I have information on that. Nephilim are equated directly with the Titans and the giants who waged war on the gods of Olympus and were said to be the offspring of Coleus and Terra. The Titans fought Zeus, but lost and were banished. They fled and left to create new civilizations in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. And next I have a note to myself, decided to look up feathered capes or apparel associated with Nephilim or giants and Atlanteans. And the reason why I have that note to myself is because at this point, this information was researched because we were doing a story with the guys about giants in America in the Kentucky River Valley area. And we started finding reports of these giant skeletons being dug up, and they all had these feathered capes with them that miraculously really kind of made it through the process of being entombed or buried. And I started realizing, because in all the myths, the Cherokees and the Osage and stuff of the area were said to have finally vanquished them, and that they had run them off, and that in all reports they had gone south. So I started following the path south, and I realized that all the major leaders of, like, say, the Maya and the Inca and all the huge South American tribes were all explained the same way. They seemed to be giants among men. They all had the same blondish hair, the same tone of skin, and they are all depicted wearing these capes with feathers. Even Quetzalcoatl is quoted as having this beautiful cape of feathers. So, in my head is like, are these original giants of the Americas, were they run off, and did they start taking over the colonies of the South Americans?
Yeah, where is that?
I would have loved to have continued, but that's where Phil shut the series off at and was like, we'll continue another time. And I was like, no!
So, yeah.
Continued.
So we will definitely
continue
on that one.
Yeah.
Because there's some good stuff in that. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to do one. Can I do one?
Okay. Absolutely. Let's do it.
Book 1, page 15.
Okie doke.
The early days.
The early days.
The early days. That's funny. Oh my gosh. So this is so appropriate.
Oh no, what did I find?
It's the
Liverpool time slips.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Perfect. No coincidence.
No coincidence whatsoever. So this page is on Imogen and the Mother Care Store, and I'll just read it out. So this story concerns a young girl by the name of Imogen. She had decided to go into Liverpool to buy her sister Abigail a few things for her new baby. Upon arriving, she was happy to see a new Mother Care Store that had opened up on the corner of Lord Street and Whitechapel. She wandered around the store and picked up a few baby items, such as cardigans, baby bibs, gloves. She was surprised to see how cheap the items were, but thought they were on offer as the store had just opened, so they were on sale. Taking them to the counter, she tried to pay with her credit card. The staff looked at her suspiciously and went off to get the manager. And when she came back, she looked at the card and told Imogen that they didn't take cards. So disappointed, Imogen went and put the items back, as she didn't have any money with her. When she got home, she told her mother what had happened, and her mother was surprised and really puzzled. That store closed years ago, she said. There's a bank there now. In fact, that's where I have my account. Not believing her, Imogen took her mother back to the same place the next day. Sure enough, the store wasn't there. It was a bank, just as her mother had told her. So it's one of the many Bold Street, Liverpool stories. There's an entire street, and we'll probably talk about it in one of the next one or two that we have here about the Bold Street slips. So apparently it happened there all the time. I have tons of stories from it.
Quite a bit about in that area.
Yeah.
Rick said Jackie says she'd like to hear more about the giants at a later time too.
Yeah, we will absolutely do that. It's a lot of research. We can certainly go through what we've already done with the guys and kind of give it a little bit more oomph.
Yeah.
And then continue on and follow them down into the Southern Americas, because I think there's a whole lot to it. It's very all linked up and connected, and it's nutty.
It is pretty cool.
All right. Do we have any more, or
does anybody else want to do one? We got like a minute left before we hit 9. So
I see that Brad's on there. So, Brad, let me see here. Let me pop him up. There we go. So I got to talk to this gentleman this last week here. He popped up in our messages saying he got to hear our podcast and said he nearly fell off of his bike. when he heard us talking about this area, he was like, I didn't know there was anybody else in Kansas who was into this stuff. I was like, well, we're so into it, we have a podcast. So I don't know if he's still on here or not. I don't know if he's like talking back yet. But yeah, it was super fun to listen to him. He had some really great stories about seeing similar lights as we were talking about last time up by the Cherryville area. So I don't know. We'll have to get some of his story. Anywho, well, if we don't have any more.
He's here. Let's pop on. He's here.
Well, yay. We're so glad that you came on to join us. I told him to get on here with us if he could. Yeah, we'll have to have you on sometime to tell your story, or if you're too nervous to, you should write it down and send it to us. So we'll read it out online.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely. Anywho, do we have anything else before we do the outro?
I think we're good. Just going over our ending stuffs.
Over our ending stuff. Yeah. So okay. So before it, don't nobody leave yet. Nobody leave. I hate it when they start bugging out early. There'll be none of that.
Looking at you, Enzo.
Okay, so really quick. Catch us live every other Wednesday night. When's the next show? I don't know the exact date.
I don't have my thing in front of me.
August something.
August 15th-ish, somewhere in there. Let me look.
Yeah.
14th. August 14th.
August 14th, 7:00 Central. We will be doing the second part of this, and there's probably going to be a third part. I am guessing by the amount of information that I have in front of me. But it's completely fascinating. Please come on the trip with us, because it's going to be fun nuts, let me tell you. Catch On the Fringe next Monday with Mark. We're going to be doing just Believe It or Not again. We do these about once a year, where we just pull in all the stories that aren't big enough for their own show, but are weird enough that they should be told. So we're just going to come in with our own stories, and we're going to try to see who can get the weirdest one in. It's super fun. Maybe we can get Enzo to come on with us.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yep. Start searching, Enzo.
I'm in.
Find your weird stories. So thank you everybody who hung out in the chats and played notebooks with us, and thank you everyone who's watching or who is going to be listening later on. Make sure remember again to like, subscribe, hit the bell, and all that good stuff. If you want to check out our show notes, some of our research, you can go up onto our website, www.bordertownparanormal.com, and find the show links at the top. You'll find underneath the Bordertown Strange button. So hit that to find all of our stuff there. You can also message us any of your stories. We would love to hear them, and we'll tell some of them online if you'd like. That'll be fun. And I think that's it, isn't it?
We got? Bordertown Paracon is coming up September 28th.
Oh, yes. Yeah, September 28th. We're going to be talking about that a lot in the coming couple of months. We're going to hopefully get some people in to interview. Some of our presenters and stuff will come in, and we'll interview them and talk a little bit about where they're coming from. Hopefully we're going to be running some ads and stuff soon. It's going to be super good this year. Not going to go into all that now because we will run super late, but we will do a whole show just on the Paracon coming up here in the next month or two. So I think that's it. So first of all, watch out for those pesky time slips while you're waiting for our show to come back on in 2 weeks.
For sure.
If you have one, let us know. That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Yep. So keep it weird, keep it strange, and remember, it's all connected. And good night.
Good night, everybody.